do what society asks you to do, society will reward you with its level of acceptance and whatever. If you defy what society asks of you, you pay a price. How will people know, whether they are cut out for it? I think you have to know yourself. It sounds like cliche, but if you break it down, it's like know your traits and know your values. In terms of career, what I've found is that as long as the boss is not an and the colleagues are not jerks and you get a decent salary to pay your bills, you're okay. Right? It's not that bad that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's not that wow that you jump out of bed every day in the morning saying, I want to go to work and change the world.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Dollar Diaries. Today we have a special guest. He's an author. He's the host of the podcast, The Real Finance Mentor, and also the author of this amazing book called Let's Get Real. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
I have one question, right? Why do you look so weird in the picture?
Is that weird?
It looks like you're scared of something.
Well, I was told by somebody that it looks like I'm holding something in my hands.
Why?
Oh yeah.
But let's not go there.
Liz's comments were you look sad and
I'm supposed to look inspirational in that picture, right?
it looks like you're talking. I think the way you were going for is that you were talking,
Right.
right? But it didn't really translate that way.
I'm supposed to be talking and conveying some powerful idea. That was the whole picturization, right?
Yeah.
But thanks for the feedback. Next book, I'll try and correct this whole
We'll get
look,
Liz
right?
to take your
We'll
photos.
get Liz to
Yeah.
take the photo, exactly. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What have you been through? How old are you? How do you live?
Okay, I'm not going to say how old I am. That's like the last thing I want to mention on this show, right? With people like less than half my age sitting around me. So, chartered accountant, CFA charter holder, 17 years in corporate life with Big Four, EY, KPMG, Anderson. And then I hit 39 and I had this eureka moment that life is too short to be spent doing stressful political stuff in corrupt organizations. At that point, I'd already been running a small training company, teaching, right? CFA prep in Dubai with two other co-founders. So it was perfect time for me to reevaluate my life priorities, right? And I was like, you know what? Life is too short. And my co-founder said, that's it. Resign, come over. The company needs you. You're great at teaching. You love teaching. So that was it. I gave my BlackBerry. That shows how old that episode was, right? And access card back to the HR director. And I walked out in April 2009, 14 years ago. And the rest, as they say, is history. Because that company grew fantastically in CFA prep and financial training. Lots of clients. Word of mouth was explosive. 2017, we sold the company to Kaplan, the international education and training giant. And this is my third phase of life. The third innings, as they say in cricket, right? Third innings of being an executive coach and mentor, podcaster, and guest on today's Dollar Diaries.
When you were our age, right? For example, did you think that you would have this eureka moment, or what was it that you thought you would be when you were young like us, like 22, 23?
You'll be surprised how naive and stupid I was when I was your age, right? I mean, I look around and see, jokes apart, I look around and see people of your age. And I think you guys are far more mature and switched on than I was when I was your age. That's because, one was because we didn't have Google, Internet, Facebook, WhatsApp, LinkedIn. But also because I lived and grew up in Trivandrum, which I don't know whether you know that place. It's a
Kerala,
tier 2 city in
I
Kerala.
live right next to Trivandrum.
Trivandrum, exactly, yeah. Good place to visit, not exactly a place to develop your character and education career. So that was a problem because it was a backwater. So you don't have these ideas. You just basically pass what everyone else is doing or do the same thing everyone else is doing and get a job like them. So I did my chartered accountancy and got a job, and that was it. So the answer, the long answer to your question was, I had no idea that I would have the eureka moment how many years, 24 years later, or 15 years later. I just get a job and that's it, right? But then, of course, life happens, career happens, and you learn.
So when you had the eureka moment, did you feel like you missed out on those previous years, or do you not really look back and do you just move forward with it?
No, you have regrets, right? When people say they don't have regrets, they're either lying or they're stupid. I mean, let's face it, right? I have regrets. I've had regrets. And I think, and I've been asked this question quite often. My regrets are that I should have been more curious and more bolder when I was younger. I should have experimented more. I should have, gone outside the well-trodden path. I should have asked more questions right from school, right? Teachers and parents. I was just too docile and amiable and obedient and naive as a result of all that, right? That's one thing, of course, you can't correct that, but I'm catching up very fast, I think, as you can probably see in the book.
I've seen that docile nature of it, right? You mentioned that it comes from the education system, perhaps, right? I've been in an Indian system, Indian
Right,
CBSE,
yeah,
where I
yeah.
didn't really do well.
Right.
I was like, you don't really learn things.
No.
You just remember points. Where I remember doing my business studies things, and there was Fayol's 14 principles.
Right.
I don't know what I've never used
You
Fayol's
just
14
memorize it.
principles.
Yeah.
Right. I've worked in a startup. I worked with big companies. I'm doing all this. Never used Fayol's 14 principles in my life. I don't even remember what Fayol's 14 principles are. Right. So if I really look back at it, that final stretch of my schooling was largely a waste, right? Like because whatever you learned or supposedly learned is not particularly useful.
No.
Right? So it comes from the cultural and the education systems of the different countries as well, right?
Correct, absolutely. So exactly. So one thing that I face when I talk to youngsters is that how much they don't know because the education system has not equipped them with that knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Like you learn about how many different types of rock there is, right? Igneous,
Yeah,
sedimentary. I mean, I still remember it now at this age, but have I ever used it? No. Or Pythagoras theorem, have I used it? No. I don't think so.
Like,
Apart
what
from
is it? Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
I mean, there is tons of stuff like that which we have stored in our brains, which occupying valuable real estate right in our brain, which is completely useless, right? But it doesn't prepare you for things like health or fitness or raising a family or navigating through your career or financial literacy, which is one of the things we are going to touch upon today.
Even like if you take forget about let's say you pursued a career in finance.
Yeah.
So the science and the different types of rock formations maybe not as useful, right?
Correct.
You look at something basic, like there is a home science topic, and what they teach is like how to do a tie-dye on your t-shirt. Like you can watch and learn this on YouTube. There's nothing substantive being taught in schools, and there is seemingly there's no change to that as well.
We live in an age where knowledge is very accessible, all over the world. I know there are underprivileged people in the world, but for the most part, right, everything is accessible. It's just we don't have a proper guide to sort of what knowledge is useful in our real life, what is necessary, what will be sort of and we're not taught, like we're always and the Indian mindset is, are you going to become an engineer or a doctor, so it's like, and that is also built because of the prestige and the sort of status that these two occupations bring in. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think?
We'll come back to the prestige and status part later because we had this interesting conversation before the recording, right?
Definitely.
But I think you mentioned something very interesting, which is the fact that all the information is out there.
Yeah.
But people are lacking in curiosity. I find that, right? I mean, if you look for it, you'll find it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? I mean, you'll find the right mentor, coach, or YouTube video, whatever, right? And that lack of curiosity goes back to childhood and schooling, right? In childhood, I don't know about how you were raised, but when in my generation, when you were raised and you ask something that the parent doesn't know, you're asked to pretty much shut up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and if you keep asking, you'll probably get a smack on the head. Right? Just stop wasting my time.
Yeah.
If you go to school and ask the teacher a question that the teacher doesn't have an answer to, you'll probably get a more polite response, not a smack on the head. And after some time, you stop asking those questions. So what's happening is through this indoctrination that goes at home and at school, you're basically your curiosity is basically squeezed out of you systematically. To a point where when you reach college, you're like, you know what? I'll just learn whatever they ask me to learn and do whatever they want me to do. So when you're 25 or 30, and I've seen that across ages, right? Because I coach people normally from 35 onwards, executives. They don't have the curiosity. They've lost it pretty much, and they would. And the reason why they don't read and they don't search about themselves or the world is because when they asked those questions when they were younger, they were told to shut up.
So they're sort of programmed to be a part of the corporate system.
Exactly. Programmed to be part of society. I call it socialization. Right?
Okay.
Not the economic part of socialist economy, but socialization where you are taught to be compliant and conformist and be a traditionalist.
Yeah.
And if you do what society asks you to do, society will reward you with its level of acceptance and whatever. If you defy what society asks of you, you pay a price.
Yeah.
99% of people are not willing to pay that price. Because that price means, and we talked about that before the show started, right?
Yeah.
That price means that you're ostracized and you're not part of the group. And all of us, or not all of us, most of us have this need to belong to a tribe. And if you don't belong to a tribe, then there are mental and physical consequences, and that's been proven by research. So people don't want to go down that road, right? So even if it is nonsense, even to have to wear a tie and a suit and a jacket in the hottest weather, okay, and drive a car or live in a house that I can't afford, I'll do it because society is telling me that I've made it in life.
Yeah, not just that, like the tie part, right?
Yeah.
This always has irked me. Like even when I was cool, I don't like to call myself like a non-conformist or like an outsider or anything. But personally, I felt like the tie, right? It makes no sense, right? You're here to learn. You're here to study. You want to be the most comfortable when you study. Why wear a tie, a belt, and everything just to,
Correct.
passively listen things? And
Correct.
you go into your workforce and you're still wearing a tie, right? It's like I would say it's one of the most inhumane things that you could do to a person, right? It's basically like a leash on a dog, but
Correct, yeah.
it's basically
It
a
is.
leash on a dog, right? There is no, it doesn't say that you're disciplined, it doesn't say that you are good. It doesn't have to exist. You're wearing the same t-shirt, you're wearing the same suit, you're wearing the same shoes, right? Your uniform is maintained, but this tie, it doesn't make sense.
But it tells you that A, you can afford to buy a tie, and B, you know how to tie a tie.
Yeah.
And here is a secret I'm going to tell you, which I've never told anyone.
Okay.
I don't know how to tie a tie. All the ties I've at home, and I've not used ties for like probably a decade and a half, were tied by my cousin, I think, when he was with me in Dubai. And then I would just hang it out ready-made and then put it. But you're right, so it's complete nonsense. But that tie is just an example Sajid, of the many things that you look at, if you look around you, that don't make sense.
Yeah.
Ridiculous things, right? Impractical things, meaningless,
We
artificial
don't
things.
question.
We don't question.
We don't question.
I went to an event this morning,
Yeah.
dressed like this. Everyone else was wearing
Yeah,
a
yeah.
jacket and shirt. And some people looked at me and said, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Why are we wearing, in this torrid summer of Dubai, why are we wearing this stifling clothing?
Yeah.
You know?
No, even if you take like a suit, for example, right? Like if you like how you look at it,
Right.
fine, fair enough, right? Good for you. But again, just to circle back on the tie, right? Looping back on the tie. The tie, right? Like it doesn't serve any purpose. You don't look good. You just look suffocated. Your collar buttons all up like this, and you're
Correct.
having a hard time moving around. Your mobility is moved. So if you're speaking, it's a pain. If you're listening, it's a pain. If you're eating, it's a pain. Right? It serves it not just the fact that it serves no purpose. It actually like what do you say? Disables certain
Impedes you.
restricts you,
you.
right?
Restricts.
Restricts you. So some of these things we never question, and we take it as like this is the golden standard of what we have to do, right? We have to go in at
Correct.
9. You have to wear in a tie, otherwise you look very impolite.
Yeah, the other related aspect is a lot of what we do, at least in India, right? Because we were colonized by the British. Since 1947, a lot of things haven't changed. One of which is, of course, the formal attire, tie and so they left with us. Other thing, the judiciary hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The education system hasn't changed much at all. We are left with, even 75 years later almost, we are left with the same antiquated systems, which they have moved on from in many respects, but we are still clinging on to those legacies or the remnants of colonialism.
Yeah. No, if you see that as well, right? India is a very interesting example. So the down south,
Yeah.
right? Kerala and Tamil Nadu,
Tamil Nadu,
where there is a lot of socialist
Right.
views of it, they had like, so a good example is that if you go back in history, Russia and India used to have a lot of ties. So all the Hindi movies and the Bollywood movies used to be very huge in Russia.
Raj Kapoor, for example.
Raj Kapoor,
Yes.
right? There's a huge following for Raj
Correct.
Kapoor in modern day Uzbekistan.
I never understood that. That's weird, right?
Right.
Uzbekistan of all places, huh?
Right. So what happened was that there was this era of cultural exchange
Yes.
where Russia sent their books and we sent them our movies. And
They also send us military hardware, by the way.
Military-
Let's not forget that one. Okay.
the culture, it's not part of the cultural.
Correct. True.
So the movies went there and the books came here. And a lot of the people who read typically, and not to be like a classist or anything, but
Yeah.
typically were from South.
Correct.
Right? A lot of Southern people read. And that's why you see a lot of common mentality between the Southern states and the communist ideas as well. So if you look at it even now, in southern states, the education, right? Even when you educate, despite all this conformity aside, there is a change to how they are teaching. Right? They teach a lot of values. There's a values being taught in school. But if you go up north, it's not as much. It's still very, very, very antiquated. So you compare your CBSE, which is your central thing, versus a state board in Tamil Nadu, it's completely different, right?
Yeah.
What they teach in state board in Tamil Nadu is far, far, far ahead than what is being taught in CBSE. All the sciences aside, everything. What it teaching in terms of value, right?
Right.
It's a lot more interesting. And I think the conformity also has like a political aspect to it, right? The more time you sit and study, the more time you grind. I know my cousin, right? He used to go to school, come back, go to tuitions, then go to another tuition, study all night, go back to school again, do this all over. And now he's like,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I've gone to engineering school. I've done engineering. What do I do now?
MBA.
He's starting his master's.
That's the next one, right?
Right?
Do his masters.
So this entire cycle, you don't have time to question who's ruling you, who
Correct.
you're voting for, who is in charge of you, what they are doing. You don't have time for this because your purpose is to just grind for the heck of
Slog.
it.
Nod your head.
Yeah,
Nod your head.
Nod your head, right? So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there is not just a, it's not just a, how we progressed kind of a thing. It's purposely done in a way to make sure that systematically you don't question these things, right? So if you're coming from that angle, right?
Yeah.
As a teacher, right? If you seeing that this is the system, how would you change that? What is your vision to changing that?
Can I change the question a little?
Yeah, go
For
ahead.
example, okay, you're a teacher. You're also an entrepreneur.
Correct.
To our youth, how would you teach the mindset of an entrepreneur, and how did you shift from nodding your head for a lot? I mean, so many years into just taking that step, changing that path of yours, and going into an entrepreneurship. Was that purely circumstances, or was that also a shift, like you said, a eureka moment? You know?
So interesting question, Guhaesh. So I was having a long morning walk along the Jumeirah beach today with a close friend of mine. And we were talking about optimism versus pessimism.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are mostly pessimistic rather than optimistic. That's the subcontinental mindset.
Yeah.
And I'm also skeptical of many things, right? And she was asking me, and I was telling her that I left corporate not because I was attracted to the idea of building a multi-million-dollar business and selling it to a multinational. I had no such plans in mind.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get out of the stress and politics and meaninglessness of a corporate life. Number one. But I was confident that I could do well because I knew I was a very good teacher.
Okay.
Because I had been teaching previously in CA and CFA classes for many years before that. And I loved it. The freedom. I loved the freedom. So, and I had a passion for teaching. So my answer would be, if you're looking for that pot of gold, exit, multi-million, multi-billion, whatever,
Yeah.
that may or may not happen.
Yeah.
But maybe your pot of gold should not be that. Your pot of gold or the rainbow should be do what you're good at doing, do what you love doing, but make sure you get paid for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not doing a charity, right? You're not running a Good Samaritans club or something, right? We have to live, right? So that was, I think, that happened fortuitously. It didn't happen by design, interestingly. I used to teach part-time for many years, found out I liked it, set up a company while I was in corporate. So, sort of side hustle kind of thing. They call it side hustle these days, right? In those days, there was no name to it. It's just, a hobby or interest you did, right? And then luckily, when I was fed up of corporate, this opportunity was there. That company has already been running and set up, the training company, right?
Yeah.
So I could easily make the transition.
Okay.
So quite a few factors played a role in that. Plus, I was, and I'm still, and I hope to remain, single. And that has a huge role to play in my journey and in anyone's journey. Because once you're at a certain age and you get married and have kids and have the mortgage, it's not going to be easy to leave that. You need that.
Commitment for
It's a huge commitment, right? The college fees, the school fees, your rentals, your living expenses, right? The mortgage. Where's that money going to come from? So I think
It gave you the mental freedom to an extent.
massively. Well, mental, financial. I didn't have to ask, check, look around, nothing. It's just like, you know what? I want to leave. I can leave. So I was in a unique position then, and I was able to live like I said, right, overnight. Give my BlackBerry and Access card back. I don't think many people have that luxury, right? But going back to your question about youngsters, I think that pot of gold is what they want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a huge monetary payoff. And they should know that entrepreneurship is really tough, man.
Yeah.
It is not as glamorous or
That's
sexy as it's made out to be. Unicorns and people standing in front of cameras and all those
It's
Instagram
also a
reels.
regional aspect to it, right?
Yeah.
Right, if you're stuck in Dubai,
Yes,
You're,
exactly.
you're whatever you, even if it's developed or developing, it's never going to be. It has a lot to catch up to US, for example,
Yes,
right? So
absolutely.
if a company in US is exiting very quickly, it's not as going to be the seamless journey over here,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people, I think, there is a lot of systems they pushing the idea of entrepreneurship to kids, which is good,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, the reality is not being pushed to them as well. I personally tried to start up a couple of things. I failed, right? One didn't operate, one we didn't have enough money to operate.
Right, right. Yeah.
Two, maybe the tech was a little too advanced to be there, right? So all this market fit and everything aside, somebody has to come and tell you that you might not get acquired, you
Yeah,
might not
yeah.
do an IPO over here
Yeah,
because this
seriously.
region's not yet ready for that,
Correct.
right? So if you are in a place where you have to advise kids, right, how do you advise it? Like, how do you push in the reality and tell somebody whatever you're doing is great, but reality sadly sucks?
Which is what I do, by the way. Not so much to entrepreneurs, but
Yeah.
friends of mine,
Yeah.
my coaching clients. All right, I'll say, listen, we have talked enough. I know who you are. You know who you are.
Yeah.
We know the market. You know, you can't break into that market. It's just not up to you, right? For various reasons, right? But there's a problem there because people have the sunk cost fallacy,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
among many other fallacies. And one of those, the implication of the sunk cost fallacy is that I have invested so much time and effort and money in this venture. It'll be a shame to walk away from all this. And I want to give it another try.
So you invest more money and
You
more
invest
time.
more money and time, and almost like throwing good money after bad, right?
Yeah.
And then gets bigger and bigger, and then so that's a problem. But to answer your question another way, how will people know, whether they are cut out for it? I think you have to know yourself. We sound like cliche, but if you break it down, it's like know your traits and know your values. Your traits are basically your behaviors, stable over time. Your values are pretty much, what your principles. And I think a lot of people navigating through life, that includes me, by the way, included me when I was younger. I had no idea about what my traits and values were. I had no idea, right? And guess when I found that out?
39.
39.
Yeah, from the book.
Exactly. 39, right? You read the book.
Yes.
Up to chapter 14. But yeah.
It's in the earlier tips.
It's in the earlier tip, exactly. So that's when, but 39 years, man, almost 40 years to figure out your values. I mean, that's a long time. That's a hell of a long time. I should have found that out earlier, right? At least I found that out 39. There are people even now in 59 who haven't found that out. Still going through the slog and being miserable at work, right?
And I think that has to do with self-awareness of it
Correct.
as well, right?
Exactly.
I think some people are, they don't have the time to be self-aware, or some of the people prefer not to be self-aware, right?
Yeah.
They're very comfortable where they are because of the stability. It's like you just have to be a machine and then just operate as a machine in the office. And like they just numb themselves day by day, numb themselves emotionally. Like when they're home, like they don't express themselves emotionally.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
just like part of who they become.
I would kind of disagree. Like, I take my dad, for example,
Yeah.
right? He's worked his
Yeah.
entire life.
Yeah.
For him, he's worked. He
Yeah.
comes home at 5. He has loved ones around.
Yeah.
He likes to have food with us, dinner with us, talk to us.
Right.
Goes to sleep, continue. And if you ask him in retrospect, he's like, I've suffered, like I've come from negatives. So now that it's not negative, I'm happy it is, right? Some people are fine with that. Right?
That's true.
That conformity is not a bad thing per se. It's just what type of person. If you are somebody who fits into the conformity, which you do get into the book, right? If you
Correct.
are somebody who fits into the conformity, you should stick to that 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
Pretty much. This goes back to the fundamental fact that people don't like change.
Yeah.
That includes me and you and everybody else, right? Change is not something we are used to. We try to keep things as they are. So we stay in the comfort zone, like you said, comfort zone. Or I like to call it the Goldilocks zone. Not
Yeah.
too cold, not too warm, just about right. What does that mean? In terms of career, what I've found is that as long as the boss is not an
Yeah.
and the colleagues are not jerks and you get a decent salary to pay your bills, you're okay. Right? It's not that bad that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
yeah.
But it's not that wow that you jump out of bed every day in the morning saying, I want to go to work and change the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's neither here nor here. It's somewhere here and you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? Now, question is, and that's a very big question mark. Should you be okay with that? Because what's your potential, right? Are you not betraying yourself by? There's a fantastic quote that I came across recently on Instagram by Dostoevsky, the famous Russian writer. I haven't read his book, so I don't want to appear like the great classical reader or whatever. Nothing like that. It's an Instagram quote.
Yeah.
But he said, "Your worst sin
Yeah.
is that you have betrayed and destroyed yourself for nothing." And I keep thinking about that even now. I read that a week ago. Every day I think about that. That's what people do, right?
Yeah.
Their worst sin is, and I saw the if movie where something similar was said by one of the characters
Yeah.
who was being interviewed,
Yeah.
and the interviewer asked him, "What's your biggest fear?"
Yeah.
And the interviewee said instantly, "Unfulfilled potential." Like, of course, it's scripted. This is awesome.
Yeah.
But this kind of thing sort of runs through my mind, and I keep telling people, guys, time will fly.
Yeah.
Life is very short, it's precious. One-time offer, you're not going to get it again, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a rehearsal, right? You come back and run it again. So why don't you go for it? Instead of being complacent,
Yeah.
right? But some people are probably okay with that. Maybe they thought about all this, right?
Yeah.
And they say, you know what?
Yeah, I've asked my dad, right?
you know,
Why don't you like start something of your own?
Yeah.
Why don't you build it? Right. For me, when I look at a business, I don't think of it like a money-making machine.
Yeah.
It's also about the legacy, what you leave behind. Right?
Yeah.
I asked my dad. My dad's like, you know what? I'm tired.
Bakr, I always talk about this. It's also about risk appetite.
Yes. Yeah.
How much risk you can take.
Yeah.
Right.
Not everybody is cut out for that high risk.
Yeah.
Especially in collectivist, especially in poor countries, like where we come from, right? Subcontinent. There's no safety net.
Yeah.
There is no guaranteed pension. There's no social security.
True.
So if you lose something, you lose it all. You
Yeah.
pretty much go back down the ladder where actually you struggled a lot to get to that level.
Yeah.
So that limits your risk-taking ability a lot.
Yeah.
So which is why, when people say there's an entrepreneurial explosion in India, I heard, right? When I was here in Dubai. And I went and asked somebody in India who knows these things. He said, no, of course not. 90% of graduates still prefer to get a job. It's the 5 or 10% who become entrepreneurs. What do you expect in this kind of culture, right? This is the kind of country we are in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also has to do with like what wealth you come from as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. If my dad has
Definitely.
some risk appetite, I should definitely have a higher risk appetite because I know there is a safety net behind me. Right. So if you're seeing like a growth in Indian entrepreneurs compared to some time horizon, that means that collectively people have been better. That's why we are seeing people who are willing to take a lot more risk.
Correct.
Right. So even if you say it's like a 5%, 2%, that 2% is still
Yes,
huge compared
yes.
to what it used to be, right?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the population of 1.4 billion. If you take 2% of that, as an example,
pretty-
it's pretty massive. Exactly.